If you looked at the theme of this week's service and said, I have no idea what resilience is or whether I have any or not, congratulations. The way you develop resilience is by weathering storms. And if you've never had to weather any, you've never had to find out whether you can ride the waves, so to speak, or sink immediately. Most of us are not in that position. Especially lately, with New York on pause and enforced quarantine, and the stress of an unknown illness stalking our communities and our families, we know about stress. We know what it feels like to worry, to have to deal with difficulties and problems and things that are just plain scary. And we also know how we deal with these stressors because we've been watching ourselves cope or not cope over the past several weeks. Resilience is the power to bounce back, the ability to face difficult and even traumatic situations and adapt to them. Most of us have some amount of resilience. We're here, aren't we? And most of us have been through problems and traumas of one kind or another, and we've managed to survive them, and sometimes even to grow as a result of surviving them. Recently, I noted that I was celebrating a 2-year anniversary of my last treatment for breast cancer. I actually had to think about it because that whole cancer thing seemed so far in the past, as if it had happened to someone else, as if it wasn't that important. And I'll admit right off the bat that one major reason for that nonchalance is because, as cancers go, I got lucky. Stage 1 instead of a higher, more dangerous stage, treatment by surgery and radiation alone, not surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy, and no recurrences, knock wood, beyond a scare last year. But another major reason I got through the experience of cancer without freaking out was because I had a good role model in terms of resilience, my late mother. I would call my mother a poster child for resilience. She did not have an easy life by any means. She had 5 kids in 7 years. Her husband, my father, had an uncertain income and a number of health problems, including pancreatitis, a quadruple heart bypass, and several serious strokes. Money was always tight, and even when I was a kid, I dimly understood that we were in precarious financial straits. As an adult, looking back, I realized that my family was usually clinging by our fingernails to the very edge of middle-class existence. Most of my siblings didn't leave home until they were in their 30s. My mom's own mother was in a nursing home with Alzheimer's for 15 years. And my mother visited her every single week, long after my grandmother no longer recognized her. And yet, my mother floated through it all. Nothing fazed her. When we hit rock bottom and went on food stamps, my mother didn't let shame or embarrassment stand between her and feeding her family. And she used those food stamps in our white, middle-class supermarkets as if they were something everybody used. Later in her life, she had a stroke that affected her left side, and she was left-handed. I called her up to see how she was doing, and the first thing she said was, "I know what you're worried about. You think you're going to have to finish the quilt that I'm making for your sister." Nothing about worries about her health or being able to work or anything like that. So I think I learned resilience from her. It can be learned, you know, and your natural ability can be enhanced by practice. And because you guys weren't fortunate enough to have grown up with my mother, I'd like to share some of her mantras that got her through, that have gotten me through, and that could help you get through as well. These are the things that she said so often that anyone in my family would immediately recognize them as hers and hear them in her voice. What else could I do? Sufficient unto the day are the evils thereof, and this too shall pass. One of the ways you build resilience, according to psychologists, is by focusing on action, on the things that you can do, and not seeing situations as completely beyond your control. That's my mother. Her most common phrase, which we heard all the time, was, "What else could I do?" She usually said this after she had volunteered to do something. It was very simple for her. not even really a question. She saw a need, a harm, something that had to be done. Because she saw it, she would do something about it. The idea of leaving a harm, a problem alone, not helping someone else because it would be too hard or take too much time or be inconvenient in some way, that didn't even occur to her. Someone needs help. What else could I do but help them? The world is complicated, a mess. There are problems everywhere. What else could I do but roll up my sleeves and take a stab at fixing what I can? In the best of seemingly intractable problems, her first instinct always was to do something to fix things. If there's something you can do, even if it's not enough, you feel as if the situation isn't completely out of your control, and that helps. That makes you resilient. The second thing my mother always used to say was, "Sufficient unto the day are the evils thereof." It's a mouthful, isn't it? It's a quote from the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, though Mom never credited it. She didn't use it in a religious context, but as a basic rule of life. The thing about this motto that's important as far as resiliency is concerned is that it acknowledges that there is evil out there. You're not ignoring it or pretending it doesn't exist. You're not denying that you have to deal with the bad stuff that's falling on your head now. You're looking right at it. You're facing it whether you like it or not. But what you're not doing is inviting in more. You're not adding to it. You're consciously staying with what's right here, right now, knowing that there probably will be more and different evils to deal with tomorrow. But that's for tomorrow, and you don't have to touch it or look at it today. It's like Emerson's roses in the first reading. They're perfect now, whatever stage of life they're in. They're not lamenting the past. They're not worrying about the future. That's what we need to be strong, to be able to bounce back, to adapt to and grow from the bad things that happen to us and to those we love. Living in the here and now, letting the evils of today be sufficient. I don't know if my mother ever read this passage from Emerson, but I'm sure she would have approved of it. And finally, what I think is most helpful to keep in mind, in heart, during hard times, is my mother's third phrase, which always gives me comfort. This, too, shall pass. In a way, it seems the opposite of sufficient unto the day are the evils thereof, because it's pointing to the future, not the present. But actually, the two mottos are complementary, and you need them both. You need to focus on the evils of the present moment, the bad stuff you have to deal with right now, but you can't get stuck there. You can't focus so deeply you lose perspective, and perspective is an important tool for building resilience. It's so easy to get short-sighted. It's so easy to focus narrowly on the here and now. It's so easy to fall into the trap of forgetting the past and just assuming that the future will be like the present in every conceivable way. When things are difficult, when I feel like I'm just treading water and the water is rising all around me and my muscles are starting to cramp, it's easy to fall into despair, to just let go and drown, to stop trying. What my mother's motto says is, don't. This too shall pass is a statement of faith. My mother had faith that things would get better, that the worst times would end. It might take a while. It may take a lot of work and trouble and struggle, but she believed that the arc of the universe does indeed bend toward justice, that good will ultimately triumph over evil. This too shall pass. We're going to get through this. May we all find our way. May we all dig deep into ourselves and find the resilience we already have and strengthen it so we can not only adapt to hard and changing times, to stress and pain, but help others to do so as well. What else could we do? May we remember that sufficient unto the day are the evils thereof, and that this too shall pass, and may we bounce back together, stronger than before.
Each week, we make an offering from the balance